Hi everyone, welcome. It looks like there are loads of people joining. We're nearly on about 500 people, so this is amazing to see such a brilliant turnout. Thank you so much everybody for joining. We're just seeing that some people are mentioning in the chat that they can't hear everything. Has everyone got sound? Oh, Kerry, you can. Oh, Marie and John, you're on it. Oh, this is lovely. We've got a few yeses going on. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being here and for joining our webinar.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Ruby. Thank you so much for joining us. Tonight, we're going to be talking about big feelings and big reactions, and we really hope that it's going to be a really helpful and informative session for you all. So, we're going to cover a whole range of topics, and we're going to get started right away so we can maximize our time with you. But first, we just want to explain that we've interwoven a lot of your pre-submitted questions into the whole session. We've also included some of your questions, which Dr. Weisberg will be talking about as well. And what we've done is we've grouped them in themes to make sure that we can respond to as many of you as possible. So I'll just give a short introduction to Dr. Weisberg. So he is an award-winning consultant clinical psychologist and is the managing director of Cape Psychology. So we're so lucky to have his time this evening. And without further ado, Dr. Weisberg.
Thank you so much, and what a lovely introduction. Yep, I'm Dr. Daniel Weisberg, a consultant clinical psychologist, and myself and Ruby will be spending the next hour with you thinking about emotions and how we as parents can work through it. Let me just tell you a little bit about the company that I work in now. So I run Cape Psychology. It's Cape who've put on this webinar this evening. Cape Psychology is an independent psychological healthcare service. So we specifically for children, adolescents and young people. That's what the CAYP stands for. We are a majority clinical psychologists offering psychological therapies for children and young people. So that's anxieties, mood challenges, emotional difficulties, parenting support, but we also offer specialist assessments as well. So that's assessments for autism, ADHD, cognitive and learning assessments, dyslexia, dyscalculia assessments. We support families through the EHCP process, through the educational tribunal process, and we also have an ADHD medication service as well run by our clinical pharmacists. So we are a psychological healthcare service, and tonight our focus is on children's emotions and emotional well-being. So let's start with language. I think a lot of people have heard the phrase challenging behavior. It's funny, within psychology, challenging behavior or language is really important for us all. And we don't actually say challenging behavior that often because it seems to be quite pathologizing. Funnily enough, we actually say behavior that challenges simply because who is the behavior challenging here? What is the purpose of that behavior? Because challenging behavior makes the assumption that it's a problem with the child, it's a personality flaw, it's a parenting problem. Whereas actually, behavior that challenges is challenging the system, and the system is asking, what is the communication that is happening here? The biggest message from tonight, and if there's one thing that you take before you all leave, it is that behavior is a form of communication. So our job is to say, what is that behavior communicating? And the best place to start is the difference between meltdowns and tantrums. We get this question a lot, Ruby, don't we? The questions of what's the difference between a meltdown versus a tantrum. I often see tantrums as a behavioral strategy. I want something. Your child is trying to get something. They want a toy, they want attention, they want to get out of a chore of some sort, and their brain is trying to get that thing. The difference with a meltdown is that this is a biological reaction that means I can't do something. A child is completely overwhelmed by sensory stuff, emotion. Their ability to think has gone offline. So a child's not trying to manipulate you. They're not being difficult. They're simply trying to survive. And that difference is exceptionally important for us to be aware of. Remember, communication. And people often have said to me, it's a bit like a smoke alarm. You know, when a smoke alarm goes off, it tells you there's a warning that's here. And that's what's happening in a meltdown. A smoke alarm has been triggered and the thinking reasoning part of your child's brain has gone offline. It's not working. Your child is in fight, flight, or freeze. It's a phrase we've often heard many times before. And there is absolutely no way that logic, consequences, lectures, information will ever be processed during a meltdown. It's not possible. Your child is struggling, and we need to understand that struggle so that we're able to work through it from there. So why don't consequences work mid meltdown? Well, during a meltdown, remember, a thinking brain has gone offline. There is no way that you can think and reason and work through things rationally. So a child cannot learn new skills at that point. You can't say something or do something that's going to change. You can't make children reflect on their behavior. A punishment won't work. In fact, during times of meltdown, the things that we need to happen, like your child calming down, cannot happen with simply saying, calm down. In fact, in the history of the phrase calm down, has that ever helped anybody calm down? No, if anything, it just has the complete opposite effect, doesn't it? It makes your child get more frustrated. Imagine doing this with another adult. I am calm. Don't tell me to be calm. Hearing that is often the reaction, and trying to punish during that moment, during a meltdown, is never going to work. It's only going to make things worse. So what do we need? Support and boundaries, but not punishment at that point.
You often say, don't you, it's about connection before correction. You use that a lot in your work. So
I do. It's a great phrase. We have to connect before we correct.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So one of your questions is about how low demand parenting, how effective is that? Is it just allowing your child to get away with things? So what do you think, Daniel?
Yeah, we've heard the phrase low demand parenting quite a lot. And for those who've never heard this phrase before, low demand parenting is essentially removing the stressors within a child's life. But it's very easily misattributed for just letting your child get away with it. They've got no boundaries. They can do whatever it is that they want. And that is not what's going on here. So remember, traditional discipline assumes that your child is refusing to cooperate. That means they won't do something. Low demand parenting is assuming your child is overloaded, which means they can't do something. There's an analogy that I've seen recently about glass balls and plastic balls. I don't know if you've ever seen this, Ruby. Essentially, if you imagine glass balls, these are your non-negotiables. Okay, this is a ball that if you drop it, it will smash. So you have to protect these. So things like being safe, mental health, managing mental health, taking medication, things that are not negotiable at all. Wearing seatbelts in a car, all of these things. Plastic balls are the negotiables, which means they can bounce. So you can drop them for a while, but they'll bounce. You pick them up when your child's got more capacity to manage. So that's tidying your room, finishing dinner, having a bath, using your manners, all things that we might want to hope that they were non-negotiables, but sometimes we can amend them. And it's different for each family. For some people, having a bath is a non-negotiable. It's a glass ball. Fine. For others, it's not. So it's about managing the demands and the stress. That's what the low demand is talking about.
Absolutely. So there's another question in relation to this about how do I know if my child is having a meltdown or if they're just pushing boundaries, which is another thing we get a lot, especially when we do our assessments at CAPE.
We do. Litmus test that you can do. It's a very simple 2-question litmus test that you can check to see, is this a meltdown or is this pushing boundaries? Question 1, does this behavior stop if you give them what they want? So in that moment, if you give in to it and the behavior then stops, yes, it's likely to be a tantrum. No, then it is a meltdown. The brain is stuck in a loop. Question 2, does your child care who is watching? Yes, that means they're looking at you, they're checking your reaction, they stop that behavior when a stranger walks by, then it's very likely to be a tantrum. No, they don't care who's watching. They'd scream the same way, even if they're in a completely empty field, then it's very likely to be a meltdown. So
Mm.
you can work it out just based on those very simple questions. Does the behavior stop if you give them what they want? And do they care who's watching?
Okay, brilliant. So moving on to behavior as communication, as we mentioned earlier.
It's the most important thing.
Mm.
Every behavior is a communication. And what we see is that you might have often heard of the iceberg analogy. Essentially, when you see an iceberg, that's what's above the waterline. That's what we see. But we all know that an iceberg has a huge amount underneath the waterline, which we don't see. And so behavior fits in exactly the same way here. So what you see when a child is reacting in a certain way is the tip of the iceberg, the bit that's above the waterline. So that might be the shouting, the screaming, the hitting, the throwing, the refusing, the shutdown, any sort of observable behavior. What is the most important part for us as psychologists, but also for us all as parents, is for us to understand that behavior. We have to see what's underneath the surface. That's the real driver of behavior. So those sorts of things could be what you see in this image here. So underneath the waterline, it might be emotions, anxiety and worry. It might be a feeling of discomfort or unhappiness. It might be that something at school is too overwhelming and too difficult. It might be a family history of something. It might be a relationship. It could be absolutely anything. But our job is to take that step back and try and understand what's going on underneath and that context that will then help us understand what we see. If we only focus on what we see, we will very likely get it wrong. And
Mm.
that means we treat the behavior as the problem, not as the communication. Yeah, and here's the great example, Ruby. So what sits under the surface? It could be sensory. It's too bright. It's too noisy. It's too smelly. Emotional. I'm scared. I'm embarrassed. I'm worried. I'm really fearful of something. The cognitive side, which is I don't understand. What if I get it wrong? Or even the physical factors. Hungry, exhausted. Have you ever heard the hangry phrase? You know, hungry and
Yeah.
angry.
Mm.
There's one that's been developed recently. So it's now what people tend to use is halt. So H and A is still you're hungry and the angry. L is lonely, and T is tired. So actually, it just
Yeah.
helps us take that step back to say what is going on
Mm.
here underneath that surface that helps us best understand why we're seeing that behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. So often we've been asked a lot when you guys all signed up about why does it all come out at home. So Daniel and I have been discussing that whilst we've been preparing for this webinar. So here are a few of the reasons.
Yeah, why does it come out at home? Now, when children's behavior come out at home, this has to be seen as a credit to you as parents, which might sound really weird because surely you want credit for the exceptional behavior and fabulousness. Whereas actually, your children are showing this behavior at home because home is a place of safety and of comfort where you are able to express, where they feel safe to be able to express those emotions. So that's the first thing to keep in mind. The other part here is that many children actually hold it together at school all day and work really hard to hold it together all day. There are rules, there are social expectations, there are a lot of demands happening at school, and many children don't want that to be disrupted. So they
Mm.
hold it together at school. It's a pattern known as masking. We cover it up and we just get through the day at school, which is great from a school point of view. You know that school feel we've got an excellent class of perfectly compliant children. And how many of you sat watching this tonight are thinking, my my child's school report says, if only I had a class full of rubies, it would be amazing. They're an exceptional child. I love having them in my classroom. And you're sat there thinking, you are not talking about the same child as what we see at home. But this is because home is where they feel safest. It's where pressure drops. It's where nervous system releases. It's it's home is a
Mm.
safe place.
So another question with this one: why do such massive reactions come from from such small things?
I think so many parents get baffled. I
Mm.
get baffled by
Yeah.
this because it's why I would say, you know, a broken cracker caused such um, upset. You know, the wrong color cup, for example. These are things. I mean, I've seen this in my house. Oh my goodness me! It happens to be on the plate that's got Thomas the Tank Engine, not Percy, and you're like, oh my god, it's a plate. Goodness me. Anyway, the shift that we need to be looking at here is that the issue is not that specific thing. That's the trigger, the cup, the cracker,
Mm.
the crisp packet, whatever. That's the trigger. We need to be considering the cause, the build up towards it. So the small thing is never actually the problem. It's just the moment the issue has come to the surface. Imagine like a bottle of Coke, for example. You know, a child is building that up throughout the day. So, you know, they put the school uniform on. The tag's a bit itchy. It's like shaking the bottle. Then they're in a maths lesson that's really difficult, shaking the bottle. And then it's really smelly in the toilets, shake the bottle. Then lunch was disgusting, shake the bottle. And then be good for the teacher, shake the bottle. So you've got a really shaken up bottle of Coke, which is ready to explode. You welcome them and you say, hi, my beautiful precious thing, here are the crisps that you've always loved. And suddenly they say, I hate these crisps, and it all comes out. And you
Yeah.
didn't cause that explosion at all, you just opened the lid. And
Mm.
that's why I think you can get big reactions from really
Yeah.
small things.
Yeah, absolutely. So another one that we've spoken about at length as well is, why does my child say they don't know why they are
Mm.
upset? And we see this a lot in the clinic as well in Cape Psychology.
We do. It's so tricky because I can talk about this from a professional point of view, but also as a from a parent's point of view. I would love to see my kids at the end of the day and say, "That was school," and they sit there and go, "Oh, it was amazing, Dad. We did this, and it was fabulous, and I loved this." And the most I get is a grunt and maybe a why is my Lego broken? You know, or something like that. And I'm thinking, oh, I'd love that. But thinking about it from a professional psychology hat perspective, I think your children literally do not know why they're upset. I think this is because of like a disconnected brain. There's a psychologist called Dan Siegel. He came up with a thing called the hand model of the brain. So essentially, he said the upstairs brain, which is like your fingers here, these four fingers, that's your logic, your language, your reasoning, your ability to answer why, you know, your higher thinking. The downstairs brain, which is your thumb and your palm, that's like the big feelings. That's the fight or flight. That's the survival instincts. And what happens when a child gets upset is the upstairs brain, this top bit, gets disconnected. It doesn't connect to these bottom parts. And our job as parents is to try to connect that up again. You know, we have to try and make that bridge between feeling an emotion and naming it, because in that moment children can't, and so it's actually an inability to be able to make that connection.
Mm. And we're going to come on to that soon as well. Language. I know in the chat some people have mentioned about language and having that emotional literacy. So we're going to get to
Mm.
that soon. So the next section is going to be about triggers and transitions.
Transitions are exceptionally tricky, aren't they, Ruby?
Mm.
They are they are really difficult for everybody. They're psychologically demanding. So a transition is any change from anything, and it could be going from one room to another. It could be from turning off an iPad to going to have a bath. It could be from going outside to inside. It could be absolutely any change. But often it is because that something has stopped and something that has been familiar has now been stopped. It's moving into a period of uncertainty or something that's different. And it's giving up a sense of control. And those three things are psychologically important for children. You know, children need to feel familiarity. It helps them feel safe. Certainty is one of the most psychologically strong concepts. When you feel certain about something, you feel safe. And when you're in control, you feel safe. And a transition is the opposite of all of those things. So a transition can feel genuinely threatening. There is a biological approach to this as well. So, for example, if you are in a position of doing something that you really enjoy, for example, we're playing Roblox on an iPad, it's stimulating. We're flooded with dopamine, which is your feel good chemical. You're really engaged with it, and suddenly it's time for a bath, or it's time for some food or something like that. You are going to be going not just that change that we talked about, but biologically going from all of this great chemical into nothing, and that feels very overwhelming.
Yeah, absolutely. So, micro and macro transitions. I know you've briefly touched on it.
This is just one way of looking at the difference between transitions, that you are like micro transitions are the tiny things that we often as parents don't even think are things. So turn off your screen, come down for dinner, brush your teeth. They are simple requests that we just assume every child is going to be able to manage that without any particular problem. And you compare that to the big transitions, which would obviously feel much more demanding, like you leave the house to go to school. Look at the weather at the moment. It's freezing cold. A house can be nice and warm and toasty, and then we're suddenly going out into the freezing cold. It's a much more obvious transition. Dropping off at school, you go from a parent's car or walking with a parent into school, going between parents' homes, going between friends' homes, whatever it may be. So the difference here, yes, might be in the size of the transition, but it's still a transition nonetheless. And so many overwhelming emotions happen in that gap between activities, because that's when there is the least preparation, the least control, the most uncertainty. And I think that's one of the reasons why transitions are exceptionally difficult for children to manage. This then can be navigated with that bridge building. Remember the hand thing that we talked about? If we've got a disconnect, we need to connect them. And it's the same thing with transitions. So let's use the example of we're on an iPad and we now need to come off the iPad to go and brush our teeth, for example. If we just say from the bottom of the stairs, switch that bloody thing off. Okay, I did that last night, but personal disclosure. That is never going to work, ever. Actually, we need to build that bridge, don't we? We need to work towards being able to achieve that change, knowing that it's such a massive shift. So let's connect with what they're doing now. I hate Roblox. I hate everything about it. I hate the brain rot nonsense. I hate the 6-7 nonsense. I like it's mind-blowingly bizarre. Is the world that children live in, and we need to have that connection before correction. I will never understand what Italian brain rots are, ever. No idea. But if I sit next to my son and just sort of show an interest and say, oh, this looks great, explain a bit about what you're doing, tell me what's going on, I love how good you are on the iPad, all that sort of connection language, actually you're connecting with what they're doing right now. There is an immediate bridge that you have built. And at that point, when you've started that process, you can name what's coming next. For example, we're going to have to go into a bath. But let's use it with language that is very easily accessible. So if you say you've got 6 minutes left, sometimes that's actually quite difficult to manage, or we've got to turn that off at 7:45. Make it much more on their level. Let's watch one more video and then it's going to be time for a bath. Or let's play one more round of this game. So you make it much more relevant to specifically that activity, as nonsensical as it might be, and then you're very much able to, well, I say this in the theoretical point of view, but you're in a much better place to help support that transition calmly. Not, I've told you 250 times. Again, personal disclosure of what happened last night. So it's very difficult to do in the moment, but this is the way that it's going to be able to help us. So we're making it calm. We're engaging, building those bridges. I think that's one of the best ways to help move forward through transitions.
Yeah. And we're so aware that sometimes saying these things can sound really, it's really easy to suggest these things, but we've got some more tips on how to manage these things soon, for example, with co-regulation and some other advice.
Yeah.
So, another question. Why are mornings and leaving the house so explosive, and what can we do to prevent this?
Mornings. Dun, dun,
Mm.
dun. So mornings are the perfect storm of life, aren't they? Because it combines the three things that we know children and families struggle with the most. And this isn't just younger primary school children, it's older teenagers as well. But it adds together time pressure, planning and working things out, which we call executive functioning, that higher order thinking, and transitions. And as we've discovered, they are all exceptionally difficult. So remember, the explosion isn't usually about having to put on shoes. It's about what the shoes represent. It's not about picking up your bag to get ready for the car. It's about what the car journey is representing. So you're essentially going to be moving from your safe place, home, pajamas, warm, parents, comfort, into a demanding place like school, noise, separation. So there's a huge shift that's here. So thinking about, and then if we add in the executive overload, so that's this idea of this higher order thinking, to an adult, get ready is a simple request. But to a child, get ready is 30 mini things, isn't it? It's find your socks, put on your socks, find the bag, brush your teeth, get your coat, all of those sorts of things. And so their ability to think things through almost crashes. It's almost a bit too much. And then add in the time pressure. But when you say, hurry up, you got 5 minutes, which we all do, that's abstract nonsense to a child, isn't it?
Mm.
It's noise. They don't feel the urgency that you're yelling. The fact that your road gets really blocked up with traffic if you leave 5 minutes later is an utter irrelevance to your children. But that adds in the pressure for it. So the time almost doesn't mean anything for them. So
Mm.
I wonder if we can add in a few ways of shifting this, which is essentially if we can try and stop the nagging in the morning, which again, I recognize the pressures for it. I'm absolutely guilty of this myself. But the idea here is instead of shouting, brush your teeth, you could point to a picture on a chart that says what's next on the plan. So you can see the order of things. A visual checklist can be really powerful. You're not going to show a visual checklist to a 14-year-old. They're going to look at you as if you've, I don't know. Let's not use the expletives that I was about to say. So we might need to have age appropriate shifts, but we want to change the conflict here. We don't want to be you versus your child. We need to be you and your child. If you can work together versus the chart versus the request, can you work together on things? Then it might be a better way of helping us to move forward here. You could add in music, things that are calming. There's someone told me about a 20-minute playlist that they had set up. So essentially, the first couple of songs are upbeat. This is like you getting dressed music. It's getting ready. The next song is like your 2-minute warning song, so you know that it's time to start putting things together and time to get ready to go. And then the last song is this is the last one, then we've got to get out the door song. So but upbeat music and ready to go. It's just a way of structuring it that might not be a visual timetable, but an auditory
Mm.
one. Connection before correction. Why is that explosion there? Can we connect with our children to help work through it?
Mm. And I'm also seeing in the chat quite a few people saying they're still struggling. They're trying all these things, and it reminds me of
Yeah.
what you said earlier with the eyes, with the seeing underneath the ice and seeing what's really going on. And if you could just touch on your what you also offer in those situations where there's children who really can't go into school and have emotional school-based avoidance or anxiety, and on that when things are getting quite extreme, what can parents do?
Yeah. Oh, Ruby, it's such a good question, and I absolutely recognise it from what parents are saying here on the chat, and also from what we hear when people come to see us. Clinical psychologists are a bit different to say counselors or like the psychologists you sometimes see on TV, where like agony ants or super nanny, where it almost presents a set answer. If you do this, then you will have fabulous children. And actually, that is not reality. Actually, the reality is you're trying all of these things and something isn't working. And when something doesn't work, the question is, why? What's going on?
Mm.
You're not doing something wrong as a parent. Absolutely not. You're doing everything that all the books have told you, that the Google has recommended, your friends have told you, your own parents have told you, yet it's not working. You very likely have tried multiple, the being the good guy, you've tried being the bad guy, you've tried the low demand stuff, all of it, yet you are still in this situation. So this is where a psychologist can be quite helpful, because what our job is to do is to take that step back and then think about what's going on here. Are we able to put some support in place that can help make these changes? Maybe we need to do something completely different and change it around, but it's only going to be based on your unique circumstances. What the WhatsApp group at school is telling you is not going to be the answers. And so every family is different. And that's where taking the step back and thinking about it individually is going to be really
Yeah.
helpful, I think.
Okay, so another question to screen time. So why does it cause such intense reactions? And how can we also manage that?
Ruby, we've gone 30 minutes and haven't said the S word yet.
I know,
Screens.
shocking.
We haven't said it. We've done a good job, haven't we? But actually, screens are the number one challenge that parents, I think, are facing today, or that society is facing today. But we're thinking about this from a parenting stuff. I wonder how many people watching tonight almost feel held hostage by screens, that there is a meltdown coming when that screen gets turned off. This is not just a habit. It's not just addiction that it's very easy to jump to. It is a physiological event. So the first thing that to keep in mind with screens and reactions like this is that screens, especially the screen stuff that most children use, games, short form videos, I think that's the technical term. So that's your TikTok videos, your YouTube shorts, your Instagram reels, anything. Check me, no, pretending I know what I'm talking about. That was Google. That really quick video floods your brain with dopamine, and you get an immediate, oh, I love that, which is why you then scroll on to the next one and want to see what comes next. That continuous, high intensity, drip feeding dopamine. When you turn that off, it is an immediate cessation of dopamine. It's like a cliff edge drop. So it plunges your brain into a state of withdrawal. Like you are now craving dopamine. And so we as adults can probably tolerate it. Often we can't tolerate it, but we try to. For children, that is just they're screaming, their aggression is not bad behavior. That is the brain saying, I need my chemical supply of dopamine. Similarly, when a screen stops, the brain just doesn't stop at that point. It actually tries harder to get it back. So when a child screams louder or throws the remote or starts getting increasingly more vocal, or the language starts becoming much more explicit, their brain is thinking, if I press it harder, if I scream louder, maybe it'll work again. When you have a TV remote and the button doesn't work, you press harder and harder.
Absolutely.
Like it's not making any difference at all. But that's what a child's brain's doing. If I scream louder, there's a chance that I might get it back. So it's a chemical shift.
So what? Yeah. So I was going to sorry to butt in, but in order to then manage that shift, what would you recommend?
So that's why it's very difficult to go from screen to demand. So screen to homework, screen to bed, screen to bath, because it's too much of a shift. We need a high sensory, low demand bridging activity between, which will be different for everybody. For me and my children, it's Lego. Other children, it's reading. Some people it's jigsaws. Some people it's spend time with the dog. Sometimes it's just getting a glass of water. Sometimes it's get outside and go on the trampoline. It could be absolutely anything, because it forces a child's body to move, metabolize that stress that's all there because of the missing dopamine
Mm.
before the brain has to then deal with a boring task.
Yeah.
So we're bridging that gap is the aim.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on to section 4, co-regulation. We mentioned this earlier, didn't we? How we can support managing, those transitions and things like that.
Yeah. There is a very well-known theory in psychology called social learning theory. It essentially tells us why children learn best from seeing other children do things. I mean, we do this as adults as well, but it's particularly effective for children. If they want to learn something, seeing it happen to another child first, or seeing how another child manages it, is the best way for them to be able to learn what to do. Far more effective than a parent or a teacher telling them directly.
Mm.
That's for learning information, but exactly the same thing works for emotions as well. So regulating emotions comes best from seeing other people regulate their emotions. So if an adult is not calm, chances are children will also be not calm, because if an adult's up here, the co-regulation means the children will meet you up here. But if your child's up here and you are down here and super calm, that's the theory, not often the reality. But let's just say that's the case. You stay down here, it will massively help your child come back down, because they are seeing how you respond to show them what regulation means. And you're able to reward calmness with your time, with your presence, with your even saying, I love how calm you are. So you screaming at a child saying, calm down, it's ridiculous when you're not this calm, will never help them to calm down. As we discovered, you're just meeting them up here. But you being calm and allowing them to show that they're gradually coming down, and then you go in and say, look how calm you are, I'm so proud of you. You comment on the calmness, you're rewarding it explicitly with your time, with your voice, with your calmness. So your nervous system, even if you're inside, acts as like a regulator for them. Remember what we
Yeah.
said, Ruby, is this is super easy for us to sit here now
Yeah.
talking without any children. Well, I've not got any children present here. You might have it at home, but that is super easy for us to be able to say. The reality is so much more difficult, which is why
Absolutely.
we can scream and shout a huge amount, and that's real life, isn't it?
Yes, and something I wanted to add, that as you just said, we really appreciate at Cape Psychology how hard this can be for parents, especially when there's multiple children and lots going on. So also we do offer parental support too, which I just wanted to mention. And we regularly support parents with managing and helping their children with their
Yeah.
regulation. So the next section, the 3 R's. You love this one, Daniel.
We love
Yeah.
not analogies. Oh, the words just gone out of my head. What's it called when you put letters to summarize things? Someone will pop it in the chat.
Yes.
Three R's like this. When emotions are when
An
emotions are run,
acronym.
an
Someone, yeah.
acronym. Thank you very much. When emotions run really high, 3 R's are really good to try to remember. So the first one is regulate. So this is the helping with the co-regulation. Calm your body down, slow your voice down, slow your breathing down, and even just taking a big deep breath helps you to regulate. I read something the other week that says if you come home from work, or you come home from a busy day or something like that, you're about to step into your house at home, just before you put the key in the door, just take 5 long deep breaths. It'll just slow you right down, because at that point, when you see fingerprints all over your wall and shoes all over the place and iPads left out that have the chance of being stamped on, you're in a much better place to be able to deal with it, because you are calm. So regulate, relate. So we want to show our children that we understand, even if we don't. That is a key bit. We're never going to be inside their heads, and often their experiences we will not be able to understand. So if we can show our understanding of their experience by relating to it. I get it. I see how upset you are. I can see how brave you're being. You must be so angry. You're commenting on what you see. You're relating to it. And then when the calmness appears, you can reason with it. You will not be able to reason with anything when emotions are high. Regulate, relate, reason. Cracking acronym.
I just wanted to mention as well, if people could just make sure their mics were turned off, a lot of people can hear other people in their rows. Also, you can move rows to an empty row if you can hear someone else. It's because you can hear each other within a row, like in a theatre. So sorry if that's affecting you. Okay, so the next one is coming back to language.
Yeah. And this goes back to what we were saying. Language before was all about almost the diagnostic language that we were using. Here, this is the language we use during high emotions. Actually, during a meltdown, that overwhelming state, language will not work. The more you say, the less effective it is. Brains will struggle to process language. We all see this all the time. When you are worked up for whatever reason, through stress at work, through fear or anxiety, or worry about something, someone talking to you about it is actually really difficult for you just to even hear the words and understand. So long explanations for children about why behavior is not appropriate, why they shouldn't do something, will just increase distress. So when we're talking about emotions, actually use the 1 minute rule, which essentially is just keep it really simple, short, repetitive phrases. Your calm presence is much more powerful. You are essentially saying, whatever you're experiencing, I am here. I'm here to support you. I've got you. I love you. And you don't have to use words for that, just your presence for it. So actually, during these heightened emotions, less language can actually be much more helpful.
So what to say? So this kind of comes back to what you were saying before, and some people in the chat are saying, what happens when they're having a meltdown during this conversation, which we'll come to, about which we've also mentioned about, waiting for them to calm down. There's people have also mentioned about what if there's a past trauma going on, which I believe we've spoken about, again, looking under the surface of what's going on. But all of these strategies you can still use irrespective of what's happening for your child. So the validation sandwich is a really brilliant approach.
Yeah, we're not ones for business speak, are we, Ruby? We often hear about the SHIT, not going to swear on a broadcast, sandwich, which is often what you hear from a business or an education point of view. You want to give someone a bit of feedback, so you give them something good, then you tell them the thing that's wrong, and then that's exactly what we need to do here. So we need to put the emotion bit in the middle and surround it on both sides. The beginning part is validate it. That's what we said before. Acknowledge the emotion, validate the emotion. Always validate the emotion. That is super difficult to actually do because you just want the emotion to stop because it can be so distressing. But we want to validate the emotion, not the behavior, the emotion. So we're saying, I can see you're upset. I understand it's difficult. You must be so angry right now. Anything like that. You are then, the middle part is putting the boundary in place. You can't throw things. You don't use that language in this house. It's not acceptable. Whatever the thing is that you want to deal with. And then, is there something you can do to work through it? The example that's here is, let's just squeeze this cushion together. Let's put the weighted blanket on. Let's jump on the trampoline. Let's push against this wall. It's something that you are able to find the alternative for, but it all comes from validating the emotion and recognizing it. And if you label the emotion, often there's nowhere for children to go. Look how upset you must be. Child going to say to that, they might turn around and go, shut up, I hate you. But actually, you've immediately connected, and you're in a much better place to then correct it. So we're supporting regulation, but managing the safety of it.
And in regards to consequences, I'm seeing this quite a lot in the chat. Where would you say that you would input a consequence in this process?
Not during this bit. That comes later, because remember, the consequences or the responses or the learning that we want our children to have will never be effective in that moment. So if they're really stressed out and angry and you say, right, that's it, you've lost your phone for a month or something like that, you're going to be worked up and angry, which means you're going to be saying something that you're never going to be able to see through. But secondly, they're never going to go with it. If anything, they'll be like, fine, take it, I don't want it anyway, I hate you, or something like that. So that has to come later when it's calm.
So another question which we have touched on briefly. So if a parent loses their calm and
Yeah.
shouts, have they made things worse?
Yeah. That is that this is one of the hardest parts for parents, isn't it? Because so many times I've said it tonight, be calm, 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 calm. But there is a lot of shame when you yell at children, fearing that you've broken your child or undone their progress. No, 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 that is not what's happening. There's a very well known within psychology statistic about parenting. Parenting has to be good enough. That's the line that we often use, good enough. What is good enough? And the statistic is healthy parent-child relationships work best when parents are fully connected with their children, which means you're calm and connected 30% of the time. That's it. 30% of the time. The statistics say anything more than 30%, there's no real difference that's there. So actually, as long as you're connected 30% of the time, parenting is good enough, which means if you shout, you will be fine. Nothing bad will come from it. Secure attachments, good relationships with your children is not about never arguing, not about never shouting. We all shout. It is built on repairing the argument.
Yeah.
Shouting and anger and stress is a normal part of human life. Actually, fixing it is the bit that I think is the most healthy part. So it goes wrong, fine. How do we repair and move on? And that is when you take responsibility, you reconnect, you can say, I'm really sorry. Your children seeing you make mistakes and then owning it is really powerful. That's not a parenting failure. That's actually a parenting win, I would say. So it's okay if you lose your calm and you shout.
Yeah, and you often say that modeling technique is also really powerful. Modeling, how to navigate once you've already shouted, and then
Yep.
hopefully your child will adopt those similar behaviors as well. So another question is, what do I do when my child is hitting, kicking, or throwing things? And this is coming up a lot in the chat about meltdowns and, also within this consequences. So if you could touch on that as well, that would be
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, and this tells us that we're going to the next stage, aren't we? So we're going just beyond a bit of shouting. We're now
Mm.
going to physical violence, and we know children get bigger. Once children now turn 6, 7, 8 years old, sometimes they're just too strong, actually. So the physical response to it is very, very different, and it's scary, really scary when violence happens. Firstly, we might think we're raising a violent child, but secondly, someone can get really hurt here. So this is as if we see this as a fight response to whatever is happening in that moment. Remember the fight, flight, or freeze. If we see it as a fight response rather than a character flaw, that immediate shift in narrative could initially help. This behavior happens when a child has flipped their lid, to use another phrase, like they've passed a certain point. They're in survival mode. Their body is moving faster than their brain. So the goal in that moment is safety, not compliance. You are not a teacher in this moment. You are a bodyguard, essentially. Violence happens at the peak of distress. Reasoning is never going to happen. We don't hit, not going to happen. Yet we have to wait for that curve to come down. The de-escalation has to happen before you can do anything else. So, don't just take being hit or anything like that. You can block it and stop it, but we need to keep as calm as possible. People can move. We can move people out of the way. That's the safety trumps everything. Okay, there is nothing wrong with saying, I'm keeping us safe. I will not let you hurt me. So a simple phrase like that to immediately state this is beyond anything else. But that's it. Simple to the point, because it's a violent reaction. We don't ask why. We don't lecture. That's just going to add fuel to the fire. Our job is to keep everybody safe, allow that emotion to be contained, allow that to come down, and then we're able to work
Yeah.
through it. We're at the peak of distress when those things happen.
And when would you recommend seeking, professional support, whether it's through your GP or a service, CAMS or a private service, when this is happening regularly? At what point would you think that's necessary?
You just said that another R there, the
Yes.
regularity of it. This is happening over and over again. It's not getting better. If anything, it's getting worse. That's a chance to say maybe we need a professional
Yeah.
opinion here.
Okay. So moving on, we've got 2 sections left, and then we're going on to when to seek professional support, and then we'll be finishing there. So we've got about 10 minutes left. So anxiety, burnout, and overload.
This is, humans are overloaded. I don't know if it's a British thing, don't know if it's a societal thing, but life is really difficult at the moment, and especially the case for children and education. And there's a nice way of visualizing it, like a bucket. Essentially, you've got a bucket here with everything that a child has. It's like a spoon of water, or a dollop of water. That's not the right phrase. Where essentially you're adding to their bucket of life, and we know that all things that they're experiencing are within this bucket: social relationships, school demands, friendship stuff, the traumas that people have mentioned on the chat, the family relationships, bereavements, divorces, life things that are all being thrown into here. Once that bucket is full, there is no more space for it to go. So even the tiniest of tiniest requests can then be that next demand, and it will overflow.
Yeah. Would you be able to just relate this to neurodivergence as well, and how this may show up in a neurodivergent child?
Yes. Thanks, Ruby, actually, because neurodivergence is essentially telling us that a child's brain is different, which means one thing for one child, which isn't even a thing, could be a massive spoon of water, ladle of water. That's a much better way of doing it, for a child's brain, a neurodivergent child's brain. So something like, putting socks on, for example, might not even be a thing for one individual child, but for another, perhaps a child who's got autism, who's very sensory, socks feel very tight, they feel funny, the fabric isn't nice, it's the wrong color, whatever it may be, isn't just a ladle of water, it's essentially another bucket of water already there. So it's different responses to different circumstances, which will affect different children in different ways.
Yes, and we're going to get on to how school and at home can support your child in a moment. We're getting some of those questions too. Okay, so burnout and school avoidance, which is a big topic that came up as well.
Yeah. And this is now essentially telling us that our emotions have got to such a point where we can't do it anymore. So burnout essentially is when you shut down. You withdraw from it. Interestingly, when we've all found ourselves doom scrolling through TikTok or whatever it may be, that is burnout. That's exactly what it is. You have hit a limit and you just need that time to do nothing. And that might be just scrolling through. Remember all the dopamine that we talked about for children? It's the same thing for us as adults. We need that. But for children, think about it from a school point of view. It becomes too difficult to manage. They shut down, they withdraw, anxiety goes up, refusal goes up, the physical reactions go up. So if you have like a job interview, or there's an exam or something, you feel the physical reaction to a mental process. It's exactly the same. When anxiety goes up, it's a mental process, but you get a physical reaction to it. So when this stress happens, you will feel ill, you will feel bad, and so you're not going to want to do anything. Nobody would. So that is not laziness. It is not naughtiness or defiance. It is an overwhelmed nervous system. It has hit a limit that cannot go any further.
Yeah. So a question. So my child says they can't go to school. How do I know if it's they can't or they physically won't?
Yeah. And this comes up a huge amount of time. I think every single person watching tonight will have heard their child say it at least once,
Yeah.
I'm not going to school. I
Yeah.
can't do it. It's too much, or something like that. So there's a difference here again between the language of the won't versus the can't. The won't essentially is choosing not to go because there is something better. Like my bed is warmer. I want to hang out with my friends. I want to play these games. They are defiant but calm. It's noisy and annoying, but just
Yeah.
um, calm generally. The avoidance bit is the can't do it. That is the overwhelmed system. It is often a child who wants to go, interestingly enough, but just can't go. They're stopped by their anxiety. They're stopped by their emotion. Their brain sees school or even just outside of the house as a threat to genuine survival. And it becomes so overwhelming that it's too difficult. You can see this on, like, say, a Sunday night, for example. On a Sunday night, they're trying to negotiate staying up late on a Sunday. Might complain, but generally stable. That's won't. Can't is when the physical symptoms start hugely before that. Stomach aches, headaches, tears, feeling
Mm,
sick. It's the anxiety of what's coming next.
yeah. Okay, so we have 5 minutes left and quite
Oh,
a few
sorry.
slides to get through. So this is a really important slide, the practical strategies. I know we've mentioned lots already, but here are some more.
Practical. I mean, I know lots of parents really love practical. What do we do about it? And a huge amount you would already have put into place. And hopefully, many of the things that we've mentioned tonight might just give a few ideas. But let's make emotions real. Emotions are very abstract ideas. Like, you can't hold anger. But if you put anger on a thermometer or a sliding scale or pictures of faces from very happy to very sad, you've suddenly made it really relevant. Connection before correction. How do we connect with that particular experience at that time? Declarative language. Rather than saying put your shoes on, sometimes you could just say, oh, we're going to be going outside where we might get cold feet, for example. You're removing that demand. That's the low demand that we were talking about. We're just declaring what needs to happen. We're describing the circumstances. We're trying to problem solve. We're working together. We're trying to reduce threats, increase safety.
Mm. So, how do I get my child to listen without everything turning into a battle? This came up quite a few times on the
Yeah.
questions.
Um, I mean, I can't tell you how easy it is to fall into this pattern, essentially. But
Mm,
when we use direct commands, put your shoes on, sit down, don't touch that. For a neurodivergent or a strong-willed child, a direct command feels like a massive shove. Their brain will perceive a threat to their autonomy and they will push back immediately. This is where declarative language, the observation, the facts can be, not always, but can be helpful. So we just state a fact and let children fill in the blanks. Invites them to problem solve rather than resist. So
mm.
instead of get in the car right now, it's we're leaving in a couple of minutes. So it's a shift to try to remove those demands.
Absolutely. And how do I support with regulation without reinforcing avoidance?
Yep.
So hard
It's a
one.
painful topic because I think parents often feel gaslit by school. Essentially, that's not to say all schools are gaslighters. Absolutely not. But what we hear this in clinic a huge amount, which is when teachers say they're fine here, which
Mm,
makes it assume that it's a parenting problem. So actually, that's not what's going on here. Quiet does not always necessarily mean calm.
yeah.
So we want to be able to advocate. We want to, yeah, we want to make sure that the message is made clear about what's going on for a particular child.
Yes.
And
I
that's
just
where this
really,
comes from. Sorry, Ruby.
no, I was going to say before people leave, there's a few other, there's one or two other slides we'd love to really quickly get through, which are super important. So supporting children at school.
Yep. And these are very common strategies that can be available, and something to link in with school, with work together with school rather than against school. That's what we want to do as psychologists. We're a team supporting your children. So is there a safe person you can go to early? Can you go through the doors a few minutes early? Is there a quiet base or a place to go to? Can we scaffold those transitions, so we know what's coming next. That bridge building that we talked about. Soft starts to the day coming in at maybe a bit of a later time. All of these are slight tweaks and changes that might make things that little bit easier to simply reduce the overload and to reduce the demand.
So
Yeah.
just quickly about advocating for their child and staff don't see the problem.
Yeah, and that's the bit that I think I was talking about before about the potentially the gaslighting bit. Essentially, we need to be explaining that actually children are finding things really difficult. Sometimes you might need a professional to support you with this, but go back to the iceberg analogy. You know, what's above the water? What do you see at school? Silence, compliance, completed work, good behavior.
Mm.
What's the reality beneath the waterline? High anxiety, sensory overwhelm, exhaustion. You know, just because you can't see the anxiety doesn't mean it's not costing energy.
Yeah. So coming to the end now, when to seek further help, really important.
Yeah, so many parents are well, no, every parent we see is doing the most amazing job of supporting their child, but sometimes it gets a bit too difficult, and that's where we as clinicians are able to offer that bit of extra help. And that's the time that I'd look into that, is if these reactions are becoming much more intense, much more frequent than say your peers or what you were seeing previously. You're not just seeing difficulties at home, but across settings, you know, out in shops, at school. You're starting to see the cracks in that masking. If family life is being hugely affected by what's going on, or you're just sat there pulling your hair out because you have tried everything and it is just not
Yeah.
working.
Yeah.
Seeking help is a strength I see.
So we have these few questions, but before we answer them briefly, I just wanted to say that people are dropping off now shortly. So if they want to be there for more webinars and get more information, to follow us on social media and to follow our website and things like that. But before we finish, we just want to just quickly touch on about the assessments and therapy and when they're useful.
Yeah. So, you know, is therapy helpful if my child won't talk? You know, sitting on a couch staring at a stranger will only increase anxiety. That's not therapy. That's like interrogation. We are not in this job to interrogate.
Yeah.
You don't need a therapist who forces a child to speak. You know, you need someone to help regulate. That might be through playing, through a connection of some sort. Our job is to speak the language of a nervous system, which is much deeper than just talking. So yes, it certainly can be helpful. You might just need a bit of a different approach, and that's where assessments can come into it. Sometimes assessments can be exceptionally helpful. I know lots of parents worry about a diagnosis like autism or ADHD will put a child in a box or limit their future or stop them getting jobs. Diagnosis is not a limitation. It can be a key, but there has to be the right key at the right time. So if you are doing an assessment and you come out with a diagnosis and it makes no difference to your life whatsoever, there's no point. There's no point in doing it, and you shouldn't do it. It might give you an understanding of what's going on, but you've probably got that understanding already. If you need that support because it opens doors, for example, it will help get extra support at school. It will help make people around your child understand their needs in much more detail. Then yes, an assessment can help, and it can also help from an education healthcare process, battling with the local authority, which I know many parents are struggling with. A diagnosis sometimes can be the answer.
Absolutely. So here we're just going to finish off, and just before people leave, I want to say a massive thank you to Dr. Weisberg. You've been absolutely amazing, and the emojis are all open at the bottom if people want to show, you know, how they found this session. If they want to do some claps and thumbs up, that would be amazing. We have a QR code here if you'd like to have some more information. If you want to inquire, a member of the team will be in touch with you and can talk through all of your child's needs and how we could best support you.
Thanks so much for coming. And Ruby, thank you. Right. Amazing. Have a good night, everyone. And
thank you so much.
We'll see you again. Be in touch.